Hampton and Dick Kirkpatrick of Mesa Community College for keeping the memory, helping to keep the memory of Ed alive. It's a generosity that we're all grateful for, and all the events have been very well attended so far. It must have been a lot of work, Julie, no question about it. And so I think a small hand to particularly Julie. I'm privileged and touched to be a part of the remembrance, and even though 4 days in Phoenix has me totally overstimulated, jazzed, and overfed, and gazing in the wrong places all the time in the streets of Phoenix, so I'll be very glad to go back to the cabin, but it has been fun. It's been 10 years since Ed died already. I find that stunning. It's frightening, because that means we're 10 years closer to it. Oh my God. And it was 10 years before he died that our correspondence and friendship began. He was famous for his postcards. Does this sound familiar? And Terry Tempest Williams, who you mustn't miss this Sunday at the Desert Botanical Gardens. I think the seats are going rapidly. I believe you have to reserve. There are at least 300 already. And Chuck Bowden is also reading with her. She put it so well, and I think she's reading the entire eulogy on Sunday, but just this little slip. I believe Ed knew and understood the practice, the art of keeping in touch, the simple act of correspondence. Think about the thousands of postcards with Abbey words, his scribblings that have crossed these lands, these sacred lands, like a blizzard, like migrating birds, like shooting stars. U.S. Mail, Abbey's courier. My friend Eric from Camp Creek tells me that Ed has been seen already. He spotted the first sopilote, turkey vulture. How many days ago was it? 3 days ago. So he's back, and of course he came to Camp Creek. Where else would he go to? It'll be a while before he gets over Phoenix, I'm sure. If only to... There's a sopilote Eduardo maybe soaring above this library at this very moment. It's just like, it would be just like him to do it in the dark, because most vultures are in bed by now. But do that. I feel that, as everybody does that has been moved by Ed's writings and inspiration, that his spirit is invincible. And a Scottish writer by the name of Thomas Carlyle, who befriended Ralph Waldo Emerson when Emerson visited England, said, and actually to me this is a tremendous thought, it places the idea of mortality here rather than over there. He said, nothing that was worthy in the past departs. No truth or goodness realized by man or woman ever dies or can die, but is all still here, and recognized or not, lives and works through endless changes. So that places immortality on earth, which is a nice thought. Viva Eduardo. I have a different program this evening, because it's so hard to put into 30 minutes apiece. Well, she rambled on a bit, you know. It's all right, don't worry, we've been doing this.
Half an hour precisely.
Precisely, I'm in. Anyway. It's all right, these people from the north, these boreal types, boring boreal types, they get a bit carried away when they come down to me.
Oh, good.
What I did at Tempe is basically say why did he write, how did he write, and for what he wrote. So I was trying to establish the spirit of the man as much as the short reading. In fact, I did more of that than the reading. But I want to go back. Just the one piece that I do want to do that I did over there is really powerful. Why did Edward Abbey write in the impassioned, irreverent, illuminating, infuriating, iconoclastic, inspiriting way that he did? Here you have it in his own words. Should I try that? No, I won't do the name. It's my belief that the right...
Yeah, do it.
No, I won't go through it. Right, sort of, it's my belief that the writer should be, and one must be, a critic of the society in which he lives. It is easy enough, and always profitable, but you in the end. He's probably laughing like a drunk. No, okay, seriously. It is my belief that a writer should be and must be a critic of the society in which he lives. It is easy enough and always profitable to rail away at national enemies beyond the sea. Easy, and it pays. But the moral duty of the free writer is to begin his work at home, to be a critic of his own community, his own government, his own culture. The more freedom the writer possesses, the greater the moral obligation to play the role of the critic. If the writer is unwilling to fill this part, then he should abandon pretense and find another line of work. How many writers do this? Whereof one fears to speak, thereof one must be silent. Far better silence than the written word, which shores up the wrong, the false, the ugly, and the evil. I believe that words count, that writing matters, that poems, essays, and novels in the long run make a difference. Why write? How to justify this mad itch of scribbling? Speaking for myself, I write to entertain my friends and exasperate our enemies. I write to record the truth of our time as best as I see it. To investigate the comedy and tragedy of human relationships. To oppose, resist, and sabotage the contemporary drift towards a global technocratic police state, whatever its ideological coloration. I write to oppose injustice, to defy power, and to speak for the voiceless. I write to make a difference. It is always a writer's duty, said Samuel Johnson, to make the world better. I write to give pleasure and promote aesthetic bliss, to honor life, praise the divine beauty of the natural world. I write for the joy and exaltation of writing itself. I write to tell my story. Who could put it better? He had an interesting thought about what he called crusaders for virtue. Now, virtue is a word that has been totally, well, in the adjectival sense, to virtue has been completely ruined the concept of virtue, which is typical of modern jargon. But virtue, of course, is a very old hat, and you hardly hear the word anymore. Interestingly enough, I'm sure Ed would agree with this, the old words, the old-fashioned words like honor, virtue, I think integrity is still hanging in there, but it's been abused so much. I've got to have integrity in this project. The point is they've gone out of use. Even common sense has gone out of use. What does that tell you? The language reveals exactly, and Emerson said the corruption of the nation is followed by the corruption of the language. And he's absolutely right. All right. So Ed said, crusaders for virtue are an awkward embarrassment to any society. They force us to make choices, either side with them, which is difficult and dangerous, or condemn them, which leads to self-betrayal. There's a thought.
Would you say that again? Would you say that again?
Oh. Crusaders for virtue are an awkward... Seriously. Crusaders for virtue are an awkward embarrassment to any society. They force us to make choices, either side with them, which is difficult and dangerous, or condemn them, which leads to self-betrayal. I'll write it out to you for a small fee afterwards if you'd like to say it. What he has to laugh. Oh, and his greatest of all line was, stand up for what you stand on. Wonderful. Stand up for what you stand on. How more simple could you get? Now, I understand and I'm quite aware that most people gravitate to Ed's, he hated the word nature writing, didn't he? Writings about the natural world. And that this is what he's best known for and appreciated like this. However, not let me tell you something. Well, I gave a reading with him 4 months before he died at Kirk Cultural Centre. And I picked him up from the airport. It was November the 11th or something like that. I picked him up, and, you know, like all of us, Desert Solitaire is the one we all really love, isn't it? Now, bear in mind, it's been 20 years since he's written that. And any writer or painter that's done something 20 years ago has no interest in what was done then. So we sort of stuck poor old Ed in the solitaire mode, didn't it? Which was something that he just called scribblings. He was amazed that it was so successful. So anyway, the point is that so I made this stupid remark. You know, the man had just brought out the American novel that he'd always wanted to write. He wanted to be a novelist. You know, he wanted to write the American novel, and The Fool's Progress had just gone out like a fool. I said, are you going to read from Desert Solitaire? And he said, absolutely not, or words to that effect. I said, well, you know, we all might think out of it. And he said, you know, he just brushed it off. So I thought that this is really, to be very honest, these readings are not really to I hate to say this, folks, they are more of a remembrance than to entertain you. So you're going to have to listen to his novel, but I think you'll find it quite amusing. I don't think anybody dies in my passage, Mary.
I can imagine what happens in your passage.
I beg your pardon. Very personal, excuse me. So we gave this reading, and he was reading from Solitaire. And our dearly beloved friend, Ralph Sullivan, was there, who is no longer with us, bless his heart, was selling books. And I think that Jamie is here, his wife. But anyway, he got a book, and this is really admirable to me. You kind of like it in this way. I usually have these immaculately, you know, scribed things so I can orate and do all these things. And I can't go, you know, what's the word, extemporaneous? It's the wrong word. But anyway, the point is that he's just sat down on the step and put in passages that he was going to read, because he never liked to lecture, did he? Reading was his thing. Well, I'm delighted to tell you that the 4 things that he put in are still there. 10 years ago, you know, the novel went up, and the 4 markings are still in the book where he did it. So I thought it'd be really neat to read one of the passages that he read 10 years or 11 years ago at Kirk Cultural Centre. I'd never taken the book. I confess, I have not read the book entirely, but now, you know, it's a good thing. So here they are, Geoffrey Bookshop. Jamie, Geoffrey Bookshop. So, time passes. So I'm going to read you The Adventures of Henry Lightcap. This is a sort of autobiography. It's loosely autobiographical. And the anti-hero, Henry Lightcap, is Ed, for the most part. Now, Ed didn't subscribe to the conventional concept of work. 6 months a year was quite enough. Thoreau said 6 weeks was sufficient to earn enough money to live the rest of the year, which seems immensely sensible. And Fred said, if you can do it in 6, I could surely do it, you know, have 6 months off, which you all should be working on. To preserve your sanity. But anyway, I'm happy to say, I hope I'm not waving the flag here, but Ed and I shared this in common. We never worked straight. I never worked I never worked a straight job for the last 35 years. I mean, like him, I always filled in or did things, but I managed to somehow not to get pulled into it. Lucky or not? Lucky or not? But Ed had that talent, and he did it, in spite of having 5 wives, which I cannot subscribe to the idea of that. I mean, 1 is sufficient, but 5? Okay. So anyway, where are you? How Henry Found His Niche, 1957. What did Henry Lightcap want? He wanted everything. What else is there? He wanted simplicity, a life of order, ceremony, frugality, beauty, passion, generosity, of clean frugality, hard beauty, fierce passion, an abundant, munificent, overwhelming generosity. The good life. When their new home collapsed at the great housewarming party in El Polito de San Pedro Martir, and Professor Beale informed Henry that he had no future in professional philosophy. You have no future, Henry. No future here, and even less of a past. No Latin, less Greek, and you flunked symbolic logic once. Linguistic analysis twice, and you flunked arts and crafts 3 times. You're going to like this one, Henry. There you go, hang in there. And I suggest, frankly, that you seek a career outside the world of academia. In sanitation engineering, perhaps, or shoe repairs. And when Myra, his wife, went back to her mother's home in 10th Street, "Will I hear from you again, Myra?" And she said, "You'll hear from my attorney." Well, then Henry concluded it was time to cast about for other means of survival. On the 1st of April, a year later, All Fool's Day, he began work as a seasonal park ranger at an obscure and very small federal park in the bleakest, loneliest corner of the state, once known as Deseret. Which you all know where it is, of course. He was the only ranger in the field, sole custodian of 30,000 acres of stone and silence. Like that. The boss lived 30 miles off behind a desk. I found my niche. Henry Lightcap thought. "Found your niche, Henry," the superintendent said. Quite. He refused to work at any job for more than half a year. If, as Henry Thoreau claimed, a man could get by on 6 weeks' work a year, then Henry Lightcap, with the occasional odd wife and maybe a kid to support, should be able to manage on 6 months a year, with a wee bit of the unemployment compensation now and then on the side, to help tide them over the winter months. And why not? And why the hell not? He earned it, didn't he? It wasn't as if he was accepting relief money. Of course, continued the superintendent, his name was Gibbs Pratt. The job lasts about 6 months, Henry. You'll be terminated in October, depending on the funds. Terminated, sir? Laid off, furloughed, without pay. Not exterminated, Henry. But if you do your job and keep your nose clean, you will have to shave every day, Henry. Oh, I will hire you back in the spring for another season. And so on, year by year. And then if you pass the civil service exam, you can become a full-time careerman like me. If and when the opening pops up. God forbid. But the old man did serve pretty good whiskey. These Park Service types were noted for their serious drinking, remote duty state, frequent transfers, hazardous rescue operations under extreme conditions, etc. Understandable. And I can be hired back every year ad infinitum, maybe? Yeah, what's more, and here the super paused to refill Henry's tumbler with another liberal slashing of old Grandad. Straight from the court, hard on his melted rocks. Super refilled his own cup. What's more, Henry, if you like the work, and we like you, there's always room for a bright young man in Washington. You're only a GS3 now, but someday, maybe 20 years from now, you could be a GS17. But the super, a thoughtful and sensitive man, gazed above Henry's head at the wall beyond, where a bull elk, painted on black outfit, trumpeting his mating call into the Rocky Mountain wilds. Not that I'd necessarily wish that on any man, but the service does have this policy, upward or out. You'll see. Gibbs appeared to have forgotten that Henry was already 29 and a half years old. But Henry knew. Why? He wondered. Where had all those years gone? He'd begun college in 1948. 9 years later, he still lacked the MA degree, or most of it. Still lacked anything that could be said to resemble a career. Lightcap was one of the few veterans of World War II who never did find full-time work. He also lacked, for the present, a wife, even a dog. Owned a little, in fact, but his 49 Chevy pickup truck, a few apple crates full of books, a tarnished second-hand Haynes flute, and one shelf trunk of shirts, pants, and overall. He'd outgrown his only three-piece suit. Failure. What kind of work did he want? Did he want to be a small-time, independent, hard-scrapping farmer like Brother Will? No. What Henry really wanted, he wanted to be a lover, a philosopher, a hunter, a warrior, a tamer of wild horses. But employment counselors never mentioned such things. Henry, the national park system is expanding. Superfund state park systems also. The American public is demanding more recreational facilities. He belched from deep in the belly. Wasn't bad, was it, for a man who doesn't drink? A profound, organical, carbonated eructation. Providing new units to the system every year. Upgrading the monuments to park status, improving the facilities, new visitor centers, new and better rollers, flush toilets at the comfort stations, cement picnic tables, paved nature trails, push-button recorded natural history lectures, all of which means we'll need more public rangers, more naturalists, and of course, most of all, more administrators. Opportunity beckons, the future lies before us, Henry. I want to be an administrator, Henry thought. Why not? Henry Lightcap. You can't be a young man all your life. Why not? It's a logical and chronicle impossibility. Says who? I think I will be a young man all my life. If you live that long. If I live that long. The super's wife appeared in the kitchen doorway. Henry politely stood up. The super looked around. Gibbsy, she said, you haven't washed the dishes yet. Gibbsy. Oh, Henry. Wash the dishes? The superintendent blushed. Yes, dear, I'll get to them. Embarrassed, he heaved himself from his easy chair, wobbling somewhat, put his hand on the fireplace mantel. Get right to it, he said, honey. I'm going to bed, the wife said. Try not to make too much noise when you put away the pans. Super nodded. The woman shuffled off. This marriage will not last. No more than mine. No matter how hard they work at it. And what's the point of marriage if you have to work at it? Does every goddamn thing in our goddamn culture have to be a goddamn job? This marriage cannot be saved. And what of it? I'll help you, Gibbs. He said he helped himself to more of the bourbon, then followed the boss into the neat little kitchen. The super washed, Henry rinsed and stacked. My wife and I had this deal, Henry. Super, she cooks, I clean up. Backwards, said Henry silently. Get rid of her. My wife and I had a similar arrangement. Henry said, the room turned around him for a moment. For a moment he thought he was going to be peculiarly ill. Thought he was going to vomit on top of the nice clean dishes in the rinse water. Steady as she goes, partner. He kept it down. That is, we had what, strictly speaking, you might call an analogous arrangement. That is, she cooked, cleaned, did the laundry, made the bed, paid the bills. I ate, read the paper, and slept on bed. Symmetry, you'll notice. Didn't know you were married like that. Not. But it was. No kidding. Seriously? Not seriously. She left a month ago. Sorry to hear that. Does she write? Oh, I get these documents from deputy sheriffs. Don't let it get you down there. Every man has to go through 2 or 3 or 4 wholesome divorces before he finds the right woman. Old story in the park service, remote duty stations, hazardous work. Marriage is largely a matter of trial and error, Henry. Or the other way around. Henry dropped a plate on the tile floor. The plate bounced once and rolled away into a corner. They ignored it. Tupperware. Henry took another hearty gulp from his glass to steady his nerves. The superintendent did the same. Well, Henry, I hope you have a happy divorce. All happy divorces are the same, Gibbsy. Henry said, but unhappy divorces are unhappy, each in a different way. Oh, it's an old story in the park service, remote duty stations, isolation, hazardous rescue operations, low trade. But we survived, Henry. If you live that long. Right. The important thing, I think, said Henry, is to avoid succumbing to cynicism. That weary resignation which passes in the decadent West for wisdom and wit. Exactly what I always say, like that. Sort of. I like the way you put it. Like that. You return to the living room, in quotes, full of dead objects. The velvet painting, the head of the big one sheet mounted on the wall above the fireplace, the closed and locked spinet, whatever that is, piano, the fold-out sofa and reclining chairs covered with genuine leatherette. The shampooed orange shag rug of 100% virgin polyester. And so what, thought Henry, so it's cheap, ugly, strictly functional. What of it? We live in a pragmatic socio-economic system. Charles Peirce, John Dewey, William James got us here. It's tough, but it's fair. And if you don't like it, see the chaplain and get your TS card punched. No, not T.S. Eliot, tough shit. They continued their discussion of employment opportunities in the park system and other aspects of life in general till the bottle was empty and no replacement magically appeared. Taking the hint, Henry rose from his chair, the vinyl clung to the back of his moist shirt, releasing him from a lingering polymeric kiss. And shook hands with Gibbsy, thanking him for the great dinner and the frank exchange of views. You're quite right. Taking the hint, Henry rose from his chair. I'm sorry, nothing, said the super. I always like to get to know a new man first week on the job, Henry, especially an intellectual type like you like that, but we don't get many of them around here in Alkali County. Glad to have you aboard. Henry stumbled forth into the dark. The super followed, kind of. Switching on the front porch light, but not immediately. Henry rose to his knees at the foot of the steps. You all right, Henry? Okay, Henry? Oh, yes, sir, fine, yes, sir. He stood up fairly straight, brushing the dust and weed seeds from his pants. He peered around doubtfully for his park service vehicle, located it, took a bearing. Thanks again, Gibbs. Lurched towards the pickup truck, climbed in, raced the engine to show the door was well, and proceeded forward in first gear into the night, slowly and carefully. The truck blundered through what felt and sounded like a wall of rocks, climbed beyond and reached the comparative ease of a paved street that led to the road. Henry shifted into higher, finer gears, switched on the headlights, and chugged north on the highway. 20 miles to go before he reached the turnoff. The dirt road that led east for 10 miles.